Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today?
Good.
Good. So we have a very intimate group here around the table, and this person over here is my wife, so she's, this is good. So I'm Ricky Telg. I have an odd-sounding last name, but somewhat oddly familiar to some of you because I am Brandon's father. So now that you see my name here, I'm going to take off the name tag because it just adds more color to my shirt here. So, yeah, what's interesting is this: is that when the guy Bull was talking about coming to Gainesville and never leaving, that's what happened here with our family. So we moved here in 1995, and I share this because it's kind of funny. Because when Brandon was going through school in the Gainesville public school system, and then coming back to the University of Florida for his master's degree, he would come home and say, "Dad, everyone's calling me Dr. Telg's son." And what's funny is now I'm saying, "Are you Brandon's dad?" You know? So I'm very proud of what he's been able to accomplish with his with what's going on with Story, GNV, and self-narrate and whatnot. But it wasn't too long ago when, and this is my story to tell, and then we'll talk about your stories and why we're here today. Back in 1994, when we were still living in Texas, he was about 5 years old and was working my dissertation over the Christmas holidays. He came up to me at the computer, this is a true story, and he said, "Dad, will you come play with me?" And a 5-year-old comes up to your dad, you can't, because I was right in the middle of getting all of my information down on my computer. I was in a really good mode of thought right there, and it's like, "Brandon, I'll play with you in a few minutes." He said, "Dad, what you doing?" I said, "I'm working on my dissertation." Of course, to a 5-year-old, they don't know what a dissertation is. Most even college students don't know what a dissertation is. They had this funny look on his face, and I was like, "Brandon, when I finish this, I'll be a doctor." Of course, for a 5-year-old, what kind of doctor do you think I'm talking about? Medical doctor. And I see it in his face, like, "No, Brandon, not that kind of give you a shot." And this true story. And he said, "Oh, so you'll be a doctor who doesn't help anybody." So yes, so all of you who have aspirations for getting a PhD one day in life, just be aware that you will be a doctor who doesn't help anybody. So at that point in my life, when Brandon told me that everything I've been doing in my school and college work for the last 5 years was like, I'm not going to help anybody, it just really does help your self-esteem. And so at that point then, I was like, I don't care about the doctor title, although they throw it up there once in a while too. So with that today, good morning everybody.
Good morning.
We're going to talk not about that, but we're going to talk about compelling messages. But before we do that, I'm sure some of you have wondered, what is the Center for Public Issues, Education, and Agriculture and Natural Resources? I'm glad you asked. So we're going to talk about elected officials and how to communicate. But before we do that, just a little bit about what we call the PI Center for Public Issues Education. So it is on the campus there, and no, we're not a bakery. So we get that sometimes. PI Center, what do you do? Research on baking? No. So what we do really is to conduct research and educational programs in the broad area of agriculture. And so when you think agriculture, most people think about production agriculture. But in Florida and beyond, agriculture has very wide and broad topics ranging from nutrition programs to natural resource programs around the state. And we do research and education in these three main areas on food and agriculture topics, issues, water and natural resources. And then really today is that third bullet point there, because we are so involved in communities and community development, particularly rural community development, but we are moving more and more into urban areas, especially related to urban nutrition programs. So that's what we do. We also develop what we call these public opinion surveys and perception surveys, what people are thinking about some of these major topics or issues about food and agriculture and the environment and communities, and to help people make informed decisions. We're not here to tell people what to say or what to think. We're just providing you with information so that you can make informed decisions, because what we find on many topics or issues is that people are making decisions usually based on incorrect information or not complete information there. So this was me about this time last year. We had a listening session in the Gainesville area on the new farm bill that's coming out. So I moderated that, which was very cool. We had senators and U.S. representatives, and they were listening to people's concerns about the upcoming farm bill. So even though this is more about what I do is more about agriculture and natural resources, what I've been able to do, of course, in the PI Center and today is to take that information and hopefully to translate it over into areas of organizations and nonprofits. We have a researcher within the PI Center who specializes in nonprofit organizations and development. So that's where we're at today. So today's topic is on creating compelling messages for elected officials. And so over the next 40 minutes or so, my hope and goal is to share with you some process about how to do this, about how to engage your elected officials at all levels of government, from local, state, and national. So how many of you, kind of to start this off, have ever communicated to, talked to, worked with any elected official, whether it's local, state, or national? Okay, so about half of you have. So what was those experiences like? What did you do particularly working with or communicating to an elected official? Anybody want to share your little bit of experience?
Good.
Good?
Good. I found out early that communicating directly with an elected official on whatever level, on whatever issue you have, it's better to do it in writing, do it succinctly, doing it without emotion, but with facts, letting them know who I am and what my concerns are. And I have found out that they do keep files for particular subjects,
Right.
and they don't take it seriously until they get several dozen on each subject.
Correct. Well, okay, we're done here. That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So what Roz said is absolutely the case. Is that what happens is that if there is no voice around an issue to an elected official or a regulatory agency, nothing's going to happen, or something's going to happen that your organization may not be positive about. So one of the first things we want to talk about is that who is an elected official? Well, as I said, it could be at any local, state, or national level. So at the local levels, again, city council, county commissioners, mayors, at the state level, representatives and their senators. And I put in parentheses there, staff, because as we'll talk about over the next few minutes or so, staff is also very important because they're the gatekeepers. They're the ones who kind of organize what goes on the representatives' calendars, but they're also very knowledgeable about specific areas. So staff is extremely important. Now, who's not? Regulatory agencies. I'm more familiar with at the state and national level with the ag issues that I deal with, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and on and on. Although they're not elected, they have a lot of power. So a lot of what we're talking about today with elected officials will translate over to agencies, especially like in listening about particular topics that come up that they have power over. So the first thing though is, can you communicate to elected officials? And so this is one of the things that you need to find out from your organization, whether you yourself are the person to talk with. And so today, my goal in this particular session is to think of us in terms of us being either constituents or as members of organizations. So most of what I'm going to talk about today is as members of organizations and our role about that organization and how we communicate these messages to elected officials. So what I have here is called reaching out versus responding. So depending on your organization, most organizations will allow you to respond to information requests from an elected official. Depending on the organization, you may not be the one to reach out to an elected official. And this is a lot of the times where if you are a member of an agency or an organization or an educational institution like the University of Florida, and you are a state government funded agency, you as an employee are not really supposed to reach out to an elected official as that employee. Now, as a constituent about an issue, you probably could, but as an employee of that organization, you have to be careful with. I know this would be the case for many of our extension offices around the state. They're not even allowed to communicate or reach out to their county commissioners. They can respond to questions that the county commissioners have because they're funded through their counties as well, but they can't reach out to them. So that brings up the question about what is your role? Is it education or is it advocating? And so Educating really is to provide science-based or evidence-based facts, which is what Roz said just a few minutes ago. In our case, this is an example of one of the things that we would do in our agricultural program. We have a statewide program called the Florida Friendly Landscape, or FFL practices, where it's mainly to make sure you have native plants in your landscaping. And so a way to educate people would be to say about the right plant at the right place, maybe to explain how increased funding could enhance benefits in your local area, such as through Master Gardener programs. But advocating would be really going out and telling someone to vote on or vote to support something in a very more overt way. So there's educating and there's advocating. So in this case here, initiating legislation banning smoking, would that be educating or advocating, or scientific research linking smoking to lung cancer? So what would you think, what would really this be under, education or advocating? Advocating. And then just providing facts to the person, what would this be, educating or advocating? Educating. And so again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what your role is in your organization, again, most of the time if you're trying to educate a local official or elected official, it's pretty okay. If you're advocating, well, advocating is really not your role as an organizational employee. That's usually the case of an advocate being a volunteer or a supporter, someone who has gone through and been part of your organization, said, this organization provides these benefits. For example, if you've ever heard of the 4-H organization, that's a youth development program through our extension offices around the state, around the country as well. Elected officials love to hear from students, from the 4-H members, and from parents and volunteers, but as the 4-H agent, I can't advocate for 4-H, but others can on my behalf. So these are these satisfied customers, willing and eager to spread the good news about your organization. So that's why when we come to talk about compelling messages, your role may be the education role, but these advocates are maybe the ones who would help to tell those stories about how things have impacted them. Okay. So the first thing you want to decide is, who are you? Are you, and this is again true for if you're talking to an elected official, it's not outside the realm of possibilities to declare the you are, whether you are representing your organization or the university, whatever, or are you just a constituent, somebody in their local district or something. So be careful about that. And again, it's easier to say that you're a constituent if the elected official is not on a committee, this is usually the state or national level, that impacts you. So, for example, again, in the agriculture program, I would be very careful about going to talk to a state or national representative about things related to agriculture or about the University of Florida, my employer. But if it were on some other area that's impacting my life, it would be perfectly fine. So just be careful and understand who are you and who is it that you are representing, okay? And by the way, if there are any questions along the way, please let me know. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is to provide a little bit of information about a couple of studies that I did this spring semester and tie them into this presentation, and then we'll end with kind of the process about elected officials and how to communicate, develop these compelling messages. So what matters for elected officials, and this is not all that matters, but in the context of what we're talking about here today, is they do want to help their community. And I put the community they represent because different representatives have different footprints, whether it's their city, county, their district in their state, or national. And so even within their own district, for example, the state and national level, they may have an urban area as well as rural areas. So even within their own district, there may be conflicting issue topics based on audiences that they have there too. But they do want to help out. They're campaigning for re-election always, 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 always. As soon as the election, by the way, we have an election coming up, get out and vote please, in November, in case you're wondering. We do have one. As soon as that election is over, and if they're successful, guess what they're thinking about? The re-election. I mean, they want to stay in because they want to help their community. So they're always thinking about election cycle. And as a result, they want to try to avoid controversy or controversial topics as much as possible. Now, sometimes they throw themselves into that role, but again, they want things to be as acceptable as possible because it helps them look good in the community too. So keep that in mind. Some things help keep them from having information overload. Don't bombard them with tons of information. Keep it simple. Be part of the solution. It's easy to complain. It is easy to complain to your elected official. It's not quite so easy, but sometimes they would like this, is to have part of the solution. Have an idea of what needs to be done to be part of that solution. Another one is now in our social media age, ways that you can tag them. I've found this out. I've been doing more visits, again, more at the state and national level with what I do. And everywhere we went to, every representative that we saw, every senator that we saw, we took the time out to take a photograph with them and say the senator's name, tag them on our Facebook pages, and then tag them as well. And they send that out. And it's huge, so don't lose that. We'll talk more about that toward the end. And the other thing here too is that your honesty and integrity are paramount. So keep that in mind. So with these surveys that I just mentioned, what I did was this spring I did a sabbatical and looked at agricultural organizations as well as county commissioners, looking at where county commissioners were going to for information about agriculture and natural resource topics, and then with the organizations themselves, and these are the 5 that I did my research on, to find out how they like to be communicated to the members from their organization, as well as what motivates them to reach out to their representatives at the local, state, and national levels. So I want to share a little bit of the results here from that, and then we'll get into the process. So to kind of give you an idea of the overall organizational demographics for the ag groups, I had 439 complete responses, which was about 50% response rate, overwhelmingly, and which is probably not surprising to a lot of us in this room. In the agriculture age organizations, overwhelmingly male, white. We asked whether they're conservative, moderate, or liberal, and as you see here, most of them were at least moderate or conservative or very conservative. And 3/4 of them were Republican, which again does not surprise us because that's typically the agricultural organization. But I wanted to provide that to you as we get into the results. So we asked them in the light green ways that they preferred to be communicated to from their organization. These are the members. And then in the dark green ways that they would like for the organizations to communicate to them to motivate them to contact elected officials. Okay? So as you can see here, the most popular way to be communicated to and to motivate people to communicate to their local and national elected officials and state elected officials were by email newsletter. But what's interesting is that other than the email newsletter, as you can see, the light green, most of them's like, don't bother us. We don't want to be communicated to from you, or if so, at a really reduced rate. But if you want us to communicate, motivate us to communicate to your local and state and national officials, not only do we like the email newsletter, but reach out by phone, print a newsletter, and by text message. So as you can see, there's a huge discrepancy here. It's like, don't bother texting us about what's going on in the organization. But if you want us to motivate us, to get us moving, to advocate for you on your behalf, text us. And this is huge based on this, and by the way, I didn't put age up here, but it was predominantly older adults too. So when we start getting into this role about texting for older adults, it's like, yeah, we don't use your phone to contact us overall, but yeah, get us motivated. Another thing too, which we were kind of surprised with, was the lack of motivation on social media. Because everything that I've been told up until this last year was social media is how people are getting advocated to communicate to their officials. At least with this group, it was like, yeah, we'll take it or leave it. We'll take it or leave it. But if you want that personal response, one of these other areas. But if you are going to do it by social media, this is what we found in our results, is that the best way to do that is through Facebook, followed by YouTube, and then Twitter for the overall ag organizations, to get them to motivate them to communicate to local officials. So just something to think about there. Now, yes?
Would you say this is unique to this particular, I know it was
I would not
for your
think
study.
so. I don't think so. I don't think it's unique to ag groups. Again, it depends on the demographic of your organization. Maybe other, a nonprofit maybe a little bit differently. Again, this was overwhelmingly white, males, older adults. But again, if you just took the older adult demographic, I don't think that this will be so much different from any other group that you would look at as well. But what we looked at as well is, have you contacted or been in contact with elected officials? And this was the yes responses. So from the local level, as you can see, the further away you get from the local level, the less that they have contacted an elected official directly. And what we found across the board here was face-to-face scheduled meetings were the predominant way that they like to communicate to their elected officials, followed by email, phone call, written letter, and then social media platforms way at the bottom. As you can see, again, they could have answered more than just one. Again, if you keep in mind 439 responses, only 21 used social media to contact a national official. We also asked some of these same questions to county commissioners. And so this column here was how they prefer to be communicated to. And this is one of the two key points I want to get across to you in just a few minutes, is that they very much preferred scheduled face-to-face meetings or email, and these were also the top two ways that the ag organizations communicated to their elected officials. Keeping in mind, again, the county commissioners here represent all across the state of Florida. Phone calls moderately preferred, and the social media platforms slightly preferred. Now that could be again by demographics as well. County commissioners typically are older. I'm not sure about what their other demographics would be. And so maybe at the state and national level that might be different, but at least at the local level, if you really want to communicate to your county commissioners, the best way to do it is face-to-face or by email. So this is the other key point too. So one is that face-to-face or personal ways to communicate are extremely important. The second one is this. So we asked our ag organizations this question. Indicate the extent to which you believe the following impact a local elected official's decision when making ag and natural resource policy issues. So we asked them, is it communication from the president or director of an organization, a farmer or rancher, in other words, someone directly involved with or impacted by a proposed policy, scientific information from a university? Hey, that's me. You know, how important is the University of Florida? Woo! And then communicating from constituents other than a farmer or rancher. And as you can see here, the highest ranking impact they had were the presidents or directors of the organization. Okay, so keep that in mind. So we asked the same question to our county commissioners with this, saying, which of the following impact your decision making when making ag and natural resource policy issues? It's a little difficult to see here because of all the numbers, but it's the farmers and ranchers, those people directly impacted. Now, what's interesting is when you compare the two, bring them together, the number one for the ag organizations was the director, the number one for the county commissioners was the farmer. The 3 was the director for the commissioners, and the 3 for the ag organizations were the farmers and ranchers. Which tells us something interesting, is that, and even for the ag organizations, they thought that the farmers and ranchers were the least impactful in telling the story or their story about their organization or whatever the issue is to county commissioners. It tells me one thing, is that for your elected official, at least at the local level, and what I found is probably to be the case at the national and state levels is this, is that it does matter who talks to the elected official. Even though the directors still impact, in this case the county commissioners' decisions on these issues, for the county commissioners at least, and again by extrapolation state and national, it is the person who is impacted by that topic that has the most impact on their decision. So the two takeaways before we get into process. Number one is that personal communication matters. Don't think that you can tweet something to somebody, they're going to although we see that we have elected officials who love to tweet, okay? And as you can see, there's a lot of things going on with that. But if you really want to make an impact, it has to be personal. And number two is, it matters who tells the story, okay? If you remember nothing else today, those two things, personal and it matters who tells the story, okay? So, let's talk about, oh, we just talked about that. So, there are 5 things I want to talk about over the next 30 minutes. And again, if you have any questions, these are the kind of the process pieces about how to do this. And this is the strategy that I would recommend for elected official engagement. Develop a rapport. You also want to identify their key values, and we'll have a short exercise about that. Preparing and telling your story, although that's the most important piece related to this particular conference. That's probably the piece that I will go over the least, because there are other avenues that we can do that. Focus the impact, keeping it simple, and then finally incorporating visits. How to visit these individuals. Okay, so if you have any experiences with any of these or questions along the way, please let me know. So, first thing is developing a rapport. Some questions that you need to keep in mind are you in that person's district or area? Even at the especially at the national level, and if you go to do have a national topic, the first thing that you'll see at the representative or the senator's webpage, they'll ask you to type in what? Anybody know?
Your address?
Your zip code.
Yeah.
Your zip
Yeah.
code. That'll be the first thing that's up there. And if you find the representative, and again, if it's not in your district, you put in your zip code, you usually automatically get a web response say, you're not in this person's district. And in essence, they're saying, so sorry, don't bother me. Okay, so always make sure you're in the district. Who do you know that they know? Again, it's about contacts. As Rod said before, it's about getting the numbers, getting people there. And it's also getting to know people who know the person. Again, that personal touch, even if it's 1 or 2 places removed, getting that foot in the door. Finding things in common, such as what is their hometown, anything you can develop that rapport with. So, again, it's all about relationship. That you being a credible source of information, that your organization is a credible organization. And this is extremely important here. It's about connect, not just during a crisis. Most of the time that when people or organizations reach out to elected officials is during a bad time or an issue that's going to impact you negatively. Well, what we find is that this rapport needs to take place over time. And so if that elected official has an event, go to the event. Reach out, hey, hi, my name is Marissa. I represent blah, blah, blah organization. I want to thank you for the things that you've done for our organization or for our community. Again, they start seeing the name. You go to the same events over time. And you have that conversation. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint. And too many times when we deal with officials and communicating and developing these messages, people think it's like a rifle. It's not. It's literally a shotgun approach where you have this broader impact over time as a marathon, not as trying to sprint through. If so, you'll feel less pressure to kind of communicate those messages when those things pop up as well. So what can you do? If you're at the Capitol, Tallahassee, or DC, visit their offices. They're always open to visits. We'll talk about how that goes in just a minute. Local offices, most of the state and national elected officials have a local office too to kind of stay within the community. Go talk to their staff there. They have at least 1 or 2 staffers here locally. Talk to them, get to know them, have them get to know you. Again, local events, provide them with information about your organization or your events. Phone calls, like I said, maybe not quite as much as it once was, but that was usually the way we communicated, but that would be another way to do that. And then again, tag key stakeholders on social media. Follow them, promote them, or say, hey, this person, this representative did this or voted this way. Hopefully something positive for your organization. But again, if you attend an event, one of these called grip and grins, you know, you grip and you shake a hand with somebody, and this is you and this is the other person. Tag that, send it on social media, they'll tag it, and they'll send it out to their folks too. It's a great way of networking. Secondly, identify elected officials' key values. How in the world do I do that? I'm glad you asked. So some of the ways that you can find that out, again, especially at the state and local level, state and national levels, are the committees that they serve on. Every elected official is on at least one, usually 3 or 4 committees, ranging from appropriations, there's an agriculture committee, there's, as we have seen the last few weeks, there's a judicial affairs committee and everything else. And what you find is that those committees that people serve on are close to their heart. If it's appropriations, it's allocating money to organizations and to different agencies and efforts there. So look for those committees, and at the local level, it could be that that the county commissioners or city council, they attend the zoning meetings or whatever. But if you start seeing what they do in their community and what they're involved with, you'll start to identify the values that they have. So what are the issues that matter to them as well as to you, and what are they doing to address those things? So when we're developing messages, what I would say is you always want to lead with values, their values, and how they align with your values. Any way that you can build this relationship, this rapport, on these shared experiences, finding out as much as you can about the person. A lot of information is on their websites because they want to provide this information to their constituents. So if you find a little nugget of information about that person, maybe you're from that person's hometown, or you know somebody from that hometown, and you get that person talking, because everyone likes to talk about, well, most everybody likes to talk about their hometown or the things that they did in school. That's a common core element, again, you can build upon. So what I have on the very back 2 pages here of your handout is a message box, okay? And I can provide this to you as a Word document if you're interested. I'll give you my email address afterward. And this is a great exercise for you to go through about developing messages that matter to elected officials. And so on this page, this is broken up into quadrants. Is the message box, okay? And so what goes in each of these message box areas? Well, on the back page there are the little stars that you see, and there are 4 types of messages to help you prepare as you're developing this relationship with elected officials. The first one is your values message, and you can jump in and out of the box at any one of these 4 areas as you're communicating to your elected officials. Again, how do you connect with the values that this person has? So some ways to do that: common ground, common experiences, something that you're, in this case, the elected official has agreed to, or we all agree to. So the example value that we would have here to share, in this case, an anti-smoking campaign aimed at children. Okay, not as adults, because all of us adults know we shouldn't do what? We shouldn't smoke. But people what? Don't listen anyway, right? But I think that we can agree that for kids don't have a choice. You know, if you're smoking around kids, it impacts them. So what's that common value that we have? Well, you know what? We can't deal with adults. Let's make sure we take care of the kids. We want what is best for children. Is that a value? Absolutely. Absolutely. So you look at that as a common value that you would have along with, in this case, the elected official. That's your values message. Finding out where those key components are that tie you together in the values. Second is the barrier message. And this is probably the area that I focus on the most, and when I'm communicating, is those misconceptions about issues or topics or things. And so this relates to usually incomplete or inaccurate information. You try to avoid repeating the misinformation or misperception. But again, reminding the audience of the value and reputation of your organization might be one of those things. So in this case, the barrier is like, yeah, you know what, it doesn't matter. A parent smoking around the kids has no impact at all. You know? No impact. Is that true or not? Absolutely not true. Secondhand smoke. So, but for a lot of folks, that may not be the case. They may not know that. So secondhand smoke causes, and this is true, this is, again, fact-based, science-based, evidence-based information, causes 150,000 cases of bronchitis and pneumonia in children annually. Your barrier message. It doesn't matter. Adults can smoke around kids. No, here's the facts, just like you said. Barrier message. Provide facts. The ask message is, what do you want the person to do, the elected official to do? You want to make the ask doable, you want to make the ask reachable. And a lot of times, this is the most difficult thing to do because as humans, sometimes our ask is huge. Maybe it's to overturn legislation that's already happened. Huge. Well, maybe it's not overturning the legislation. Maybe it's what? Maybe it's addressing one or two things in that previous law that you want to see changed. Again, making sure that it's doable and reachable. So, do we say that we want to ban smoking? No, that's probably too big of a thing. Or to get, or the worst one is trying to get smokers to quit. That's probably not going to happen. But what could happen is that go do it someplace else. If you smoke, go outside. Why? Keep it away from the kids. Okay? Something that's doable. And that's one of the things I would recommend in your ask is making sure that your ask is doable and reachable. And then finally, the vision message. This usually echoes the value message. This is what you, as not only the organization, but you as the elected official and you as your community get because of your value. And so we all want healthy children. So if you take your smoking outside, this will protect your children's health. Does that make sense? So again, it's that tying it together. This is what is our value. We want best health for our kids. And secondhand smoke can cause damage to the kids. But some people may not know that. So what we're asking for you to do is to in this case, provide some type of policy or regulation that, and this happens in Gainesville, that if you want to smoke in a restaurant, guess what? You got to go outside. In this case, maybe something that would help to protect children because we all want healthy kids. Yes.
Sorry to speak, but actually when I was walking over here from McCarty Hall, I noticed it's Florida, University of Florida.
It's a smoking-free campus.
One thing I remember as a child, my parents smoked, my mom quit, and my dad quit, but anyway. I remember getting on a plane at 10 years old, and the little astronaut, everybody was smoking on the plane in the 70s. And so what I see you saying is, if you tackle it one little piece at a time, which is what they've done, now we've gone from smoking on a plane, being stuck around it all the time, to they don't even let you smoke on campus. Disney, they might have a place here or there, but it's like, you're not smoking there.
Right.
And so it's taken 50 years, but piece by piece, my grandchildren will be much better off than I was when it comes to smoking.
Absolutely. But and that's what I'm saying here is that when you go and talk these messages, make sure that they're doable. Make sure that they're reachable. I mean, they may be pie in the sky, literally, that we're trying to ask for, maybe too much. Focus on those things, those common ground, those values, those shared values with the organization, with the elected official. So this, again, very helpful tool. So you can start here and say, okay, what is my value statement? What am I really, what do we want to see happen? What that value? What do we all value? What's that barrier to this particular topic that I'm trying to reach out to? What is that ask? Making sure that it's doable and reachable. And then finally, how do we tie this all together in the vision, in a perfect situation? What are we trying to accomplish here? So, message box, okay? Oh, there's the graphic right there, okay. So thirdly, prepping and telling your story. And again, this is some of the things that Brandon and Jaron have done previously, so I'm going to kind of go over this briefly because the preparing and telling your overall story is something that they have covered many places, many times. What we try to do in this case is that story is important. I'll just say story is important because you want to create that emotional connection. Did I say before about scientific facts? Yes. Facts usually are not filled with what? Emotion, okay? It is what it is. That's why when we talk to elected officials, again, my role as an educator is to provide those facts. An advocate, someone on my behalf, those farmers and ranchers, or those local people who are affected by the policy, they're your advocates. They're the ones who say, this is my story. This is why this is important to me, and as a result, this is why I think it's important for you to vote a certain way or to do some type of action, because I want to create that emotional connection to you. We'll talk about ways to do that in a second. Again, if you can elicit a positive emotional response, they will be more likely to remember you and how you made them feel, probably more so than all the data that I can provide to you on all this topic. That's why with the horrible things that happened this past week with the hurricane, I mean, we cannot fathom what's happened to the folks at Mexico Beach and all the way up through the Carolinas because of Hurricane Michael. And the numbers are overwhelming. So what do reporters do? They focus on what? The story of one person. So if you look at any of the stories in the Gainesville Sun today, they give kind of an overall about the numbers of people displaced and the amount of damage done and the estimates of the billions of dollars of damage. But where it makes a difference and what matters to us is that story of that person who's lost everything. So that's why story is important. It tells you as an organization, helps you to be able to communicate these messages to individuals. So the key point here, and again, all this is in your notes here, is to focus on a primary point when you're telling your story. You don't want your story to be all over the place. Again, depending on what the topic is, find those individuals who can focus their story down to tell why this is a good idea or a bad idea, the policy that you're trying to deal with, and to create that emotional connection. So the next bullet points we'll go back into the storytelling piece there too, because how do we do that? Because what we want to focus on here is impact. Impact. What is the impact of my story? What are the impact of the things that have happened to me as a result of proposed legislation or impact? And we also want to keep it simple. So the things we want to do is to report on this quantifiable information, such as economic growth or health or the environment, how did this work, improve the situation. Stories with impact of some sort like this are the types of things that elected officials love to hear. So how did this legislation impact or improve workforce development? So you might have someone come in and talk about, because of this new job development program in our community, I, as a result, have a job. And it's a good job. And because of what you have done, Mr. or Ms. elected official, in supporting that, now we have a more robust economy. Do you think that makes a difference to the elected official? Heck yeah. Why? Because it's part of their values. And they've seen, because of the previous ask, that they have now seen a division completed. So that's what the economic development, efficient use of resources, natural resources, gas, all the things we have there, and economic development. There was some examples about how, if you can tie those things that matter to the individual, the elected official, and how it impacts the community as well as individuals, impact makes a huge difference in your story. So how do we do that? Identify and tell success stories. So that's why it's important it may not be you as the president or director of your organization. And I think that's why the county commissioners said what they did. Because for the ag organizations, the members, they see their presidents or their directors as what? The voice. They're the voice of the organization. They're the reasons why. They're the president for a reason of the organization, the director. We pay their money. We support what they do. They're the ones who are supposed to talk about what the needs are in the ag organizations. But for the county commissioners, it was what? It was those local people, the people impacted by what was going on, those success stories, those people impacted that are more important than the presidents or directors of the organization. Tell the local story. And again, this idea of an elevator message, are you familiar with that? Your elevator speech? Okay. It's true. It matters. If you can boil everything down to a couple of minutes or less, that's important. We'll talk about elevator message in just a second. Well, we'll talk about it down. So, we're running out of time. So, elevator messages matter. We saw this so well about a week or two ago. You remember the story that happened with Senator Flake? There was a protester. Where was that protester? Literally, in the elevator. And you may disagree with how things turned out. I'm not going to get into political issues right now. But it was interesting that he said, I will say we'll move this forward. The Kavanaugh's approval will move this forward, but I want a 1-week delay with an FBI investigation, and we can almost tie that particular decision to what? an elevator message of a protester who was able to communicate a message to this individual. Now, you may disagree with what happened. Like I said, I'm not going to get into that whole issue. But the idea here is that elevator messages do matter. Even if it's short, that was literally an elevator message. But what I'm talking about, a short message, a clear message about what you want to accomplish is key to getting your message across. So key numbers are important, but not too many. Okay, pick out 1 or 2 numbers, or better yet, big, broad pictures. Paint a picture. Word pictures are wonderful. 1 in 4, 2 times more likely. How many of us do remember specific numbers? Not a whole lot. You know, we don't remember numbers. We don't. I have a hard time remembering my Social Security number. I've been on this for 53 years. You know? But I can remember how, you know, I was born. I do remember that. Not when I was born. Double the impact of fruits and vegetables. So any way that you can help somebody paint a word picture with numbers or statistics is important. Infographics, those are great. We use that a lot in the PI Center. We create these, we call them issue guides, which are what people's perceptions are on ag issues. And we could have just provided statistical graphs, but we turn them into infographics. You know, 1 or 2 pieces of information that they can see. It's like, oh, that makes more sense, as opposed to in fiscal year 2007, it was here, 2008, it was here, 2009, it was here. But if you can show an infographic on a topic, it's much easier to understand. The last thing is to incorporate visits and education materials to your elected officials. Again, as we said before, personal matters. And so if it's a visit to their offices, state, local, nationally, or if they have local offices here, if they're a state or national official, it does matter. Now, timing is a huge deal, okay? Expect 30 minutes, maybe get 15. Again, the higher up the chain that you go, the less time that you're going to have. Local, I mean, a lot of folks here, you could probably spend an hour talking to their office because they're here. They may know you. They may know your organization. The farther away you get from local, the less time you have. I was up in D.C. in March doing Hill visits, talking to representatives and senators from Florida on ag issues. Most of the time we had 30 minutes scheduled. You know how many times we actually had? Like 18 visits that we made. I think that we had 30 minutes maybe in 6 of those. Most of them were much less because they were coming from committee meetings, they had this going on, and so you were just happy with whatever you got, okay? So that's why elevator messages are important, because you go from 30 minutes down to 15, in a couple of cases it's like, hi, I'm such and such, walk with me. And that happened a couple of times. So we're like walking the hallway with this person, and they say, what do you want? It's pretty much, that was not me because I can't advocate. I was there kind of answering the education question. So our advocates for us said, this is our ask. And it's like, okay, and do you have information? And we gave them on 1 page, which I'll show you in just a second. And that was it. You have very little time, very little time. But if you have a relationship over time, you don't have to spend all your time in that ask. Again, it's a local office and they know who you are. You built that marathon as opposed to that sprint. Much easier, much better to take place. So schedule a visit, let people know what this visit is about. Prepare yourself that you may not see the person. That happened in 2 of the cases, and usually, again, the further up the chain you get, the less power that you get over the person's schedule. Representatives, there are more representatives. There's only how many senators in the state of Florida? 2. Very good. I won't give it away. 2. And so we scheduled with both senators, Rubio and Nelson, and guess how many we got to see? 0, okay? So, but we did get to talk to who? Their staffers. And their staffers are probably as important as they are because they tell in this case, senators, what the issues are, what's the story behind the issues, and then what's the stories of the issues. So you talk to them, they're wonderful people to work with. They're sometimes called legislative assistants. Keep it brief, as I said, keep it brief. You gotta keep it brief. Time is a huge factor. The biggest thing here is don't be partisan, okay, at all. No matter if you're Republican and the person you're talking to is the Democrat from your area or vice versa, it doesn't matter. You're focusing on these compelling messages and stories that move your agency or organization forward. It doesn't matter what their political views are or yours are. You have a different agenda in this case. And that is to build, in this case, how story can help move you forward. So infographics are important, stress the outcomes or the impacts, and get to the ask. The other thing too is listen. Don't fill the time so much that it's all about you. We met with Ted Yoho when we were in DC. This is the only time this happened. We were scheduled for 30 minutes. We went an hour and a half. That never happens. And do you know why? Guess who was talking? Ted Yoho was, okay? And guess what we were doing? Listening. And you know why? Because as he was talking, we want to talk about ag issues, okay? What's this district? Right here, okay? What's he interested in? Agriculture, but he's also interested in what? University of Florida. So because most of the ag group representatives that we had there had a University of Florida tie, he started talking about University of Florida. It's not necessarily what we want to talk about, but guess what we did? We listened, okay? Did that make a difference to him? I don't know, but it did show that we were listening to what he was talking about. So if they're talking, you listen, okay? And know your role, as I was saying before, photo opportunities we talked about, huge, huge thing. But know your role. If you go, again, more at the state and national level in a delegation, and that's what we did. We had 6 people with our delegation, and we went on these 18 visits. Know who's going to say what. In my case, I can't advocate, but know who's going to advocate on your agency's or organization's behalf. Know what you're going to say. So after about the 3rd one that we went to, it was like clockwork. Everyone knew exactly. We practiced ahead of time the night before. Who was going to say what? Whose story was going to be told in a particular issue or topic based on that person's shared value. It may be a different person's story based on the person that you're going to go see has a different maybe value. But then have that idea. And if you have groups or visits that are so jam-packed together, again, this is at the state and national level, you may have to split your group up because time is of essence. Story is important. They may not remember anything else, they may remember your story. And that's the key point here today, is that story is huge. And be careful who you bring, okay? This is another thing too. Be careful who you bring. Make sure that person has a positive relationship or reputation in your community, is not seen as a partisan or advocate for something that may be seen as a negative. I hate to say it, but it's true. You've got to be sure that you pick the right person to tell the story to the people. So, let me skip through that. Just to say on that particular slide, it says, bring materials, but don't bring too much. You don't want to overwhelm, especially at the national level. What I saw was that people were bringing these big folders of information. This is what's going to happen to it. It goes over there. You know how many people they meet with, or groups they meet with in a day? Probably 10 to 15 a day, and that pile gets huge. So that's why a one-pager, and usually with your one-pager, you have the ask at the top, that you're asking this particular elected official, local, state, or national, for X dollars or to vote on this policy, and you give the reason why. One page, maybe front, back, but no more than that, because that's all they're going to be able to remember. Not under the question. What about emails? We talked about emails. This is one thing that I've learned over time. Back in the day, we were told, send these form emails. You know that you have that this. Already pre-produced for you, and that literally all you do is change your email address and change your name at the top. It don't work, okay? It can help you guide you, but you still want to tell what? Your story. So personalized emails are much more impactful than the form email that we used to always try to generate and get word out to people. And the other thing too, as far as mail, snail mail goes, I didn't know this, but even at the federal level particularly, it's better to email than mail, because all of their mail still is shipped off-site. It's because of the anthrax issues before. So if there's a particular timing issue, if you get people to send mail, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 weeks before they ever get to that, because they have to check everything. I did not know that. So last thing, this is kind of pulling it all together. Keep in mind what matters to elected officials. That's what, if it matters to them and it aligns with what you're doing, very good. Who tells a story is huge. Direct interaction, personal, has more influence than any other strategy when it comes to these compelling messages with local officials. Develop a rapport, identify their values and keys and messages, and you can do that with that message box. Preparing and telling your story. Impact is huge. And then visits and education materials are also very, very helpful. With that, have a few minutes for questions. Yes?
When I send emails, and I can tell you that Ted Yoho knows who I am.
Very good. Okay. Good.
When I send an email, I only send one subject per email.
That's great.
Do not confuse them.
Yep.
If you have more than one subject, you want to do a separate email for each one.
Yep.
I state my case with bullet points. I always put, you use ask, I put request,
Mhm.
because I want him to know what I want from him
Right.
in return. And I always put down there, consider this email the tip of the iceberg that I am writing to you, that other people are concerned about, but will not write.
Okay, good.
Because I want him to know that this is not a singular concern in the community.
Yeah, that's great. Yes?
You know, I think one of the things that is really important in what you've said is get your information together before you do anything. That if you don't have the data, if you don't have the information, if you don't have the stories,
That's correct.
it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
So it's the pre-preparation.
Yeah,
Does that
no,
make
this
sense?
is not something you be knee-jerk about.
No.
It's something you've got to think through, plan out, all the way through. Yes?
Another thing, when I have asked for personal time with an elected official, I only ask for 15 minutes because it is a segment of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
If it goes over, it's his
That's right.
over. And I get my information together and I don't waste it on pleasantries. I get right to the point,
Right.
you know.
And part of the reason that you're able to do that is what? Because you're doing what? You're a marathonist right now because people know you've made that connection. What tends to happen because we're relational people is that we feel like we have to make the pleasantries to begin with. If it's the first time you met the person and you spend 15 minutes to get to know the person, whatever, and not get to brass tacks. And a lot of these times, these short meetings, you don't have that much time. One thing I will say this is that bring business cards. Again, if you're going to visit them in DC particularly, I didn't realize how many of my business cards you exchanged, but that's a big thing too, so help people bring business cards when you go to, at least for the national level. Any other questions? What I would say is this, if you do have any other questions, I'll be happy to respond. That's my email address, rwtelg. Yes, I am Brandon's father. Really came in late. I have to make that distinction now because he's better known than I am. In Gainesville, you're Brandon's father. But I also have a couple of publications that are coming out probably the next week or two. They're called EDIS publications. It's our fact sheets. It stands for Electronic Data Information System. I know. Go figure that. But they should be online probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so most everything I've covered today will be on these fact sheets. So if you would like those to download and use in your organizations, it's pretty much a step-by-step using all of this information that you're welcome. It's free information for you to use there. Again, 2 big things, personal, and what's the other one? Personal touch. We'll keep it brief. And the story, and we'll see, that's all good stuff. Personal, and it matters who tells the story.
Yeah.
The other points are good too, okay? But those are 2 things. It's got to be personal touch, personal relationship, and it doesn't matter who tells the story. With that, thank you very much for your time this morning. I know the other folks